Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this historic first ever candidates forum sponsored by the Portland Commission on Disabilities. My name is Nyla McCarthy and I'm the chair of the Commission on Disabilities, and the reason I use the term historic is because this really is the first time that people with disabilities as a constituent in this city and perhaps in this state, perhaps in many places, have actually had an opportunity to host a forum and have had the candidates' willingness to come and represent us. So number one, let's thank them. And isn't it a wise choice on their behalf, since people with disabilities comprise 20% of the population and only 4% of disabilities are visible. 1 out of every 5 voters could be a person with a disability, so well done, gentlemen. So we have a format that we're going to follow today. We have, the Commission on Disabilities has 4 subcommittees. Each subcommittee has gotten together. We solicited information from you, some of you who are out there online, through our commission, and we've come up with questions that we think are very critical for Portland's next mayor to answer. Each chair of each subcommittee will pose the questions on behalf of their subcommittee. After I've made my short, almost finished opening remarks, each candidate is going to be given 5 minutes as a general opportunity to talk, and then we will ask questions. They will each be given 3 minutes to respond to their question. Our lovely and wonderful timekeeper, Chris Logan, has a bell and he will ring it. Chris, let's hear that bell. 30 seconds, gentlemen, before it's time for you to wrap up. And then, as often happens, people are mid-thoughts, and it will be my job to be the evil, your time is up person after the lovely sound of the bell. So that's pretty much what we are doing. We are, again, really thrilled to have you out here. I would like to say that the Commission on Disabilities is really working to represent the needs of folks in this city. We have a work plan. Everything is online. We have some seats available. So I'm going to take a moment to say, if you like what you've seen today, I would suggest you go online and look at the work plan that we have begun working on. Look at the successes we've had, the places we need to go, and bring your energy and bring your skills to us. We're very welcoming. We work hard. We celebrate. And we're doing the best we can to make Portland a truly inclusive city. So with that, I will, Representative Smith received he called the heads, so he gets to have his 5-minute opening remarks first, and then we'll ask you to follow.
Thanks for having us. My name is Jefferson Smith. Can everybody hear me with the microphone this far away? This is the first forum we've done in the general election, and I think it's a fitting forum and a fitting place to do it. My impression is that the key challenge facing Portland now in this decade, in this century, is how we can get the city working for more people. How I grew to appreciate that more was living where I live and representing where I represent. We have 3 elder care facilities within a baseball toss of my house. My street has no sidewalk. There is a school in my legislative district where kids have to travel nearly a mile to cross the street because there is, if they want to do it legally, because there's no nearby crosswalk. My friend Michael Egan tools around in his chair on busy streets that lack sidewalks anytime he wants to come down to testify in front of City Hall. My wife and I have been stealing some moments to watch, as many Portlanders have, the Olympics, and had a chance to watch Olympic runner Oscar Pistorius, who said the following: "My mother used to tell us in the mornings, Carl, put on your shoes. Oscar, you put on your prosthetic legs." So I grew up not really thinking I had a disability. I grew up thinking I had different shoes. It speaks to what we can accomplish together when we presume inclusion and then work to make it a reality. When different capabilities are recognized as part of the natural, diverse spectrum of humanity, and that some of us have different shoes. As a kid, I bumped into things more than almost anybody. It made me more aware that there should be fewer hard corners. And the argument I would make when we were purchasing furniture was that that would be good for everybody, because everybody bumps into it from time to time. In getting to the hard part, we should avoid today, as we should avoid in every forum, seeking how we can appeal to a particular contingent of the city, even if it's 1 out of 5 members of our city, even if 4% of our city is recognizable. We should be making the case of how we can make the city work for the whole city. This relates to the theory of inclusion. My friend Sarah Gelser, who is perhaps the leading state legislator in our state working on issues around inclusion and disability, has made that case to me for 4 years, which is that we not look to divide ourselves up and think about different treatment, but how we can make the whole picture work for the whole picture. Since the beginning of this race, we've been working on 3 things that we will continue to work on if I'm elected mayor. Getting the city working better for more people. Let me offer several areas with a little bit greater degree of specificity. First, age-friendly transportation and infrastructure. I mentioned some of the transportation challenges faced by my neighbors. They're reflected also in Coley and in Southwest Portland and in different places around our city. We often hear about a conflict between bikes and cars. What we don't hear as often is that we have an aging population and many people are driving less. We need a more universally accessible and age-friendly and human-friendly transportation system that works for everyone. Places to hide from the rain, buses people can get onto without a high vertical leap, sidewalks and expanded shoulders, places to sit, people feeling safe on transit. Whether you're 8 or 80, whether your shoes are mine or Oscar Pistorius's, or if your shoes are wheels. Not everyone thinks of themselves as a person who may someday have a disability, but everyone has been a kid and everyone hopes to reach old age. Schools. I was honored to join Charlie to testify in favor of the school bond. We need this to be part of a 30-year effort to retrofit our schools, to improve our schools, and that includes moving in a direction of universal access. Third, housing and community living. Affordable housing is an enormous challenge in our town, not only for people with disabilities, but for all sorts of people facing income challenges. We should be pushing for inclusionary zonings, and as we're building all these big, or as people are building these big apartment complexes, including places for wheelchair vehicles and accessibility. Over the course of the questions, we'll have time to talk more about public safety and how we can improve having a mobile crisis unit, around economic development, how we can make sure that there's real access to real jobs, about access to democracy. In the legislature, we passed online voter registration, working with Disability Rights Oregon, and figuring out how democracy and our systems of decision-making can also work for more people.
Thank you. I always like it when people talk a little faster at the end when they're aware that the time's coming up. So well done. Okay, Mr. Hales.
Thank you. How's that microphone? Is that okay? I really appreciate this forum. It is one of an uncounted number that we will no doubt have in the next 88 days. But I'm really glad that this is the first and that you're all here. Some of you know me pretty well, some of you less so. So let me give you a sketch of my vision for the city and of my qualifications for this office, and then some thoughts about this important and specific agenda. My vision for Portland is one that I think you all share, and that's a city that's safe and green and prosperous in every neighborhood and for every citizen. And we've done a lot of good things in this city to advance that ideal, but we're not there yet. And your agenda, as laid out in this comprehensive work plan, is an important part of that map to the future. I'm very proud of the role that I played as an elected leader in this community before. As a city commissioner in charge of parks and transportation, we made more parks accessible, built community centers in places that didn't have them, and put more low-floor transit on the street than any other city in America at any other time. I'm really proud of that record, but again, we have a long way to go. Some of you may be less familiar with what I've been doing in the last 10 years. Been working for a consulting engineering and planning firm based in Omaha with an office here in Portland, and helping cities all over the country follow our lead in transit. I think some of us don't give ourselves enough credit around here for what a model Portland is, of not just environmentalism and livability, but of transit. Because there are streetcars running in Seattle. and soon in Tucson and Washington, D.C. and Cincinnati and a lot of other unlikely places that are directly modeled after our streetcar project. There is light rail in Minneapolis and Pittsburgh and Houston and Phoenix, of all places. Who'd have thunk it that they'd actually build light rail in Phoenix and then that they'd ride it in huge numbers. So I've been helping these other cities, in many cases, design and build the very first project that starts them on the path that we've all been on together in transportation, and the national leader among those cities. And I'll tell you, the satisfaction of seeing the quality of life change that comes with that transit is the best part of all. People that used to be marooned at a bus stop with no shelter and uncertain service, to be able to have that quality of transit service, to be able to roll onto a low-floor vehicle and know when it's coming. Those physical improvements have made uncounted improvements in people's lives. And to me, that's been the best part of this work. Yeah, it's great being the inspiring city that inspires other cities, and I'm glad we have that role. But to see that result in people's lives has just been great for me as a person that cares about the outcomes from what the public sector does. The convenience and dignity that comes to people's lives when the public sector does the right thing are what we're all working for. I've also continued to work on those ideas here in Portland as a private citizen. I think it's important to look at us as candidates not just on what we say, but what we do. Spent a lot of time helping Cody and April Goldberg try to build Harper's Playground in Arbor Lodge Park and helping them fundraise for that, and they're almost there, and working with some of you to get that project planned and built. I've been on the Parks Foundation, which created that amazing new director park space in downtown Portland that's fully accessible and fully loved by people every day, especially on a day like this. I've also been involved in Friends of Trees, which continue to green Portland. But again, what I see in these projects is that spirit of partnership and of making Portland better for everybody that I think we're all here to celebrate and to work on. What do I bring to the job? I think I bring three qualities that are important in a mayor. One is leadership, an overused word, no doubt. But leadership to me means the ability to bring people together, sometimes in unlikely partnerships, and get things actually done. Not just plan, but implement. Because that's why you want this document to not be on a shelf. You want it to make it real for people. Secondly, I bring experience. Those of you that worked with me before, in fact, some of the proudest endorsements I have is from people that work for city bureaus who've told their neighbors and friends what it was like to work with me. Maybe I didn't make every employee happy every day, but it seems like I made a lot of them happy, and that we got a lot done together, and we created a spirit of shared enterprise that makes them want to work with me again. So that experience of knowing how the complex environment of all these government entities and all these partnerships and all these nonprofits actually work together to accomplish things is something that, of course, I know and will be able to put to use on day one. And then third is a focus on local government.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to stop, but you're going to have a chance to come to it. Yes, okay,
No,
next
sorry.
time. See, now you
So,
understand
it's
people
my
with
hearing
hearing, yeah.
disability. It runs in the family.
All right, little
So
points for that.
I will finish with that thought, that I'm focused on this office, and I will run for no other. And that'll allow me the freedom to do the right thing, including helping you make these plans real. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll ding that bell a little more aggressively. I'd like to let you all
My
know.
family know my favorite word is huh, so that's my apology.
The candidates have not heard these questions. So gentlemen, put your thinking caps on. We're going to have a fun little ride here. We're going to ask you some questions, and you'll have 3 minutes each to respond. The first question, actually, I think each of you have addressed in your opening remarks, but this will actually give you a chance to go a little deeper. So given that people with disabilities are, in fact, the largest minority population in the world, cutting across race, cutting across class, cutting across age, we'd like to know what you think are the 3 most pressing issues that are facing people with disabilities in the city of Portland. So Representative Smith, you go first.
It depends on how we divide it up, whether we do it by policy category or sort of life challenge. I would divide it up probably this, name 3. Did you say that a mayor can address, or just that folks are facing?
What do you think the three most pressing are? And of course, as mayor, we would like to know how you would, we'll get to that, but what do you think they are?
Particularly, I'm putting an overlay what I think the mayor can do. I'd offer the following three. I mentioned a bit about transportation and accessibility generally. And to get a little deeper, one of the challenges we're facing is that revenues for transportation are not keeping up with transportation needs. And probably everybody in this room appreciates the value of newer transportation projects because they're more likely to be ADA compliant, more likely to be sort of human accessible. Challenge is the gas tax increase recently passed, projected to have $300 million to Portland now projects to have $160 million. That's not our mayor's fault. That's a projection's fault. That's economy's fault. That's people driving less. That's people graduating from their jobs. That's people retiring. So figuring out how we can work together in a resource-constrained environment to make sure when we're building roads, we can build sidewalks, that we can in fact build those roads, or at least wider shoulders, that we can have curb cuts where we can afford them, where they are required in every possible place we can, where we can think about buses with lower floors, and not only about rail transit, but also about more accessible bus transit. I think that figuring out transportation now in a resource-constrained environment would be one. Second, what does the job picture look like for our whole community, particularly people with disabilities? We have extraordinarily too high rates of unemployment among many of our communities, including communities with disabilities. And how can we make sure they're not, I know there's a lawsuit happening right now, how can we make sure our definition of a job is actually a job and not something that pays $2 an hour and is probably a violation of federal law? How can we provide workforce training opportunities? How can, with Work Systems, Inc., and with potentially the Office of Equity, looking at how in our plans, really, it's been 2.5 minutes? Oh, that's quick. Mm-hmm. I thought it was fair. We're out of practice. This is our first one. It's like summer. It's like, hey. And the third one for speed, I will just say building accessibility. I think a similar challenge facing transportation accessibility is facing building accessibility. How do we get the revenues? How can we find cost-saving opportunities to make schools accessible so we're not segregating communities and saying only a small number of our schools are suitable for important members of our community?
So to let you both know, there will be a follow-up question to each of you. So now that you've had a chance to kind of answer that and think, how will you, if you are mayor, collaborate with this commission, the Portland Commission on Disabilities, to resolve some of the issues that you've just been speaking about?
Well, some of that I hope to look to you to say and ask you what are some of the best ways that we can interface. But on each one, I would say taking a look at the plan, thinking about how it overlays with our own comprehensive plan, how it overlays with the Portland plan, and sort of doing backcasting for what we want to get to, making sure that when we are planning, that we're planning with the whole picture in mind. And doing that, when we're forming committees, for instance, making sure this commission has a voice either on that committee or a voice on who should participate, so that we're seeing the whole picture. I think that'll fit for both transportation and for building accessibility. I didn't say anything about housing because I only had three. And what I'd also hope is that we could use the assembled wisdom and work in this room to think about not only the many priorities on which folks will advise, but on the short list of priorities on which we will work. And that wouldn't, what I have learned from starting and running a nonprofit organization that had staff but was largely volunteer run, was recognizing that people put in more energy and work if they thought they were working on their thing rather than working on my thing as an executive director, as an executive. So much will be not merely me saying, oh, well, here is your work list, and I hope you'll do it, but thinking instead about, all right, what are the highest priorities we're going to work towards? How can I help you accomplish those priorities?
Thank you. All right. Your turn.
It's hard to pick three, of course, so let me take a stab at it. The first, I think, is an overarching issue that although as mayor and as a member of this council, we won't change the whole picture, but we're advocates and participants in it, and that's a healthcare system that works for everyone. That's a national issue, it's a state issue, it's an issue in our community, it's an issue for us as an employer. It matters, and we should be passionate and activist on making sure that everyone has access to health care. I'm a single payer guy myself, but whatever solution we can get to that works for everyone, I'm going to be an advocate for it. Secondly is that issue of transportation. I agree with Jeff about that. Streets, sidewalks, you know, I think often about 117th because I've seen how it fails to connect two schools, a park, big church, maybe two big churches, and gets to light rail kind of, sort of, but there are only sidewalks next to the school and the park. And so you do see people in that street on wheelchairs. You see kids on that street who shouldn't be on the street, but who should be on a sidewalk. Third is the school system, not just the buildings. I think we all agree on the need to fix up the buildings, but we need to have adequate and reliable school funding on the program side, and to have classroom sizes and teaching assistants and programs for kids with special needs, and not have those be pressed so badly by the fiscal crisis that we've been in for 20 years. So those are the top three for me.
Okay, well done, and you heard it that time too, didn't you? All right.
I'm programmed now.
You're programmed. So then how will you work with this commission on those issues?
As with a lot of things, you don't have to wonder about how I will operate based on what just I say now, because you can remember in some of your cases or ask people who were here how I did operate. We had people with disabilities working in my office, and that's important, that we provide a leadership and an example in our office itself. Secondly, I did have the opportunity to appoint people to boards and commissions, and went out of my way to make sure that we were inclusive, and that then I really listened to those commissions. And I think if you've talked to people that were on boards and commissions that I had appointment responsibility for during the years I was in city government, they'll tell you that. And then third, although I think Commissioner Fritz is doing a great job on the subject of the Office of Equity, I've mentioned this to Dante, I think that office should be in the mayor's portfolio because that sends a message. And that's where I'll place it. That sends a message to the whole organization that equity is a priority. So out of no disrespect to her, but in a belief that that should be a central function, that's one of the bureaus that I'm likely to assign to myself when I assign bureaus.
Okay, we're getting to some good stuff. Now, life is always filled with interesting changes. We're about ready to have the subcommittee chairs ask their questions, and Representative Smith shared with me in writing something which I had not noticed at the beginning, which is that he won the coin toss. He would like to go second. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that what you meant by closing?
No,
At the end.
as long as we're alternating. I just want to make sure that we're alternating.
Oh, okay. So we'll even be more flexible because that's what life will be. So I'm going to introduce Commissioner Joe Vanderveer, and he is one of the co-chairs of our Accessibility and Built Environment Commission, which pays a lot of attention. And if you look on our work plan, you will see. And Commissioner Vanderveer, take it away. And I think this time, Mr. Hales, you get to go first.
Okay, gentlemen, one of the primary challenges for people with disabilities in Portland is a critical lack of affordable, accessible housing options. This deficiency has already reached a crisis level, and under current policies will only get worse as our population ages and the need for accessible housing increases in areas of high opportunity. So given this, what do you view as the city's responsibility in promoting the development of an equitable distribution of accessible housing, and what would be your plan for increasing housing options for people with disabilities throughout the city?
You're right, it's a crisis. You're right, we've also done some good things in this community. I've been very involved in the past in a couple of the community development corporations, particularly REACH and HOST, that have worked hard to create affordable housing in this community. I think those models of community development corporations are still a valid tool. I'm actually also very excited about this land trust model. I've seen Proud Grounds work, and that model of affordable home ownership is very exciting to me because I think we should be providing people a spectrum of affordable housing opportunities, not just affordable rentals. So I think those models of the land trust model that Proud Ground is now proving out and the CDC model are still very valid tools. We're going to have to get creative, because the money available through PDC's 30% set aside is going to decline. And as we reduce the scope of urban renewal in the city's budget, it's going to decline more. So we have to find new resources as well as make those kind of creative partnerships work.
Your follow-up question?
My follow-up is, how might city policies be utilized to promote private market development of affordable, accessible housing?
One of the subjects I've raised is the question of our systems development charges. They're very high. And there is an exception for affordability. And assuming that we keep the current structure of systems development charges, that's the kind of creative signals that the city ought to send. That if you're doing the right thing, you pay less. I think there may be some other ways we can send those kinds of incentives to affordable projects. The tax abatement program that the city's had for multifamily housing could also be adjusted to, again, better focus on accessibility. So those are the kinds of tools I think we can use to send signals to the private market.
Representative Smith.
I think there are a few things we should do, explore, and first understand the context. The part of the challenge we have with affordable housing in Portland is that a tool that almost every city in the country has is inclusionary zoning. Our state bans it because the Home Builders Association passed a law to prohibit this city from requiring inclusionary zoning as development occurred. One thing that the mayor should do is work with the legislature, and I don't want to overstate the case, but it is in this respect a piece of good news that my experience and recent experience includes service in the legislature, to work on an elimination or a relaxation of the ban on systems development charges, on inclusionary zoning. I do want to say something about systems development charges. Because as it stands, mostly what we have left as tools is education, saying please, and bribery. Right? The tools we have to require are much reduced. That would be the best tool. We need to maintain the 30% set aside in urban renewal zones for affordable housing, but that is not nearly enough, particularly as urban renewal zones become harder tools to use. Another thing we should use, anticipating your follow-up question, is that as we upzone, making sure we have affordable units within new apartments, making sure that our comprehensive plan contemplates that, making sure as we offer moving a single-family home into a multi-unit facility, which is going to be happening, is already happening, and will be happening more as we try to fit 5,000 or 6,000 people a year into the city. Making sure that one time we have something a little bit closer to a lever, a little bit closer to not just a bribe, is saying, all right, we will allow for the upzoning, but if and only if you do a 20%, or maybe it's 30%, maybe it's 25% inclusion of affordable housing. A difference that we have had on systems development charges, I do think there are tools for relaxations. A disagreement we have had, I think it was a very bad idea to eliminate systems development charges for 2 years, because yes, although that might or might not facilitate more projects, it also removes the dollars we need for parks and streets and sewer and water, and parks and streets are some of the very things we're talking about in terms of 21st century accessible infrastructure.
All right, and the follow-up question, do you need it restated, or you got it? Go ahead,
How
Joe.
might city policies be utilized to promote private market development of affordable, accessible housing?
Accessible, affordable.
Yeah, each of my answers was essentially trying to answer that question. I won't take your time to repeat.
Okay. So now I'm going to introduce Commissioner Travis Wall, who is the chair of the Employment Subcommittee. The Employment Subcommittee recently was very successful, for those of you who are not aware of, passing the first initiative in Portland unanimously with City Council for creating jobs and looking at employment practices on behalf of people with disabilities. So, Commissioner Wall.
Thank you. As a result of a lack of understanding, opportunity, access, accommodations, in some cases outright prejudice and discrimination, people with disabilities experience underemployment and unemployment at far greater rates than all other groups of citizens. Earlier this year, as Nyla just shared, the Portland City Council unanimously passed a resolution committing the city as an employer of over 6,000 employees to becoming a model employer of individuals with disabilities. If elected mayor of Portland, what steps and what actions will you take to see that this resolution is implemented in an appropriate, meaningful, and timely manner?
And Representative Smith, the ball's back in your court.
Few tools. One, the working with you. Two, working with the Office of Equity and thinking about how that overlays. Three, and I should point out that I think I'm the only candidate in the race who supported the Office of Equity from the beginning, and I continue to. Three, I want a voice from this room on my transition team. So as we're thinking about not only frontline workers, but also jobs within the mayor's office and appointments that the mayor gets to make, that we're thinking about how we're seeing the whole picture. Yes, including people with disabilities, also trying to maintain the trajectory of something that our current mayor has done to his credit, which is have one of, if not the most diverse mayor's offices in the history of our city. I think that's something we should build upon. Those are beyond that. I think if we maintain the current head of HR, we should make sure that there is a pretty deep commitment to this question. If in the event that we change the head of HR in the city, we should make sure that new person has preferably a track record, but at least a commitment to seeing the whole picture when it comes to hiring and accomplishing the goals that we've set out. Those are a few things I think we should do.
The follow-up question is, the model employer resolution addresses the responsibility to the city as a public entity. However, most employers in Portland are private businesses or nonprofit organizations. What steps and action will you take to increase employment of individuals with disabilities by Portland's private sector?
I don't have a perfect answer. And don't want to pretend that I do. Something I've seen that seems helpful is think beyond the label, which is working to connect companies who are trying to diversify their workforce with workers who are trying to get jobs, including especially people with disabilities. What the mayor's office can do beyond trumpeting the good work that's happening, beyond leading by example, beyond reminding people about existing federal law, the one scholarly work that I did in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy was actually only mildly related, but it was on the deinstitutionalization of, under Title II of the American Disability Act, of people with developmental disabilities. And had some, if you want to sleep some night, I recommend reading it prior, and you will get through page 6 of 95. And looked at what tools there might be for education and what the limits of, what the requirements are that employers aren't actually living up to. And I think there are some right now, including the employment case I mentioned earlier.
So let me start with what the city might do. One thing that I saw used very well by Mayor Katz when she was in office was having the whole council sit in informal session with resource people to grapple with a problem like this, rather than simply having the commissioner in charge develop a proposal, perhaps with the advice of the commission like this one, or maybe, unfortunately, in some cases not enough, and then bring it to the council only for formal reaction by the public in a public hearing. And that's a normal and mechanical part of how the city does business. But that process of having informal sessions where the council deliberates together, I think is very healthy, and it allows us to bring in resource people, whether it's a commission or others as well. And then that allows us to better say to the very large bureaucracy that we all manage, this is a shared objective and shared responsibility. And I think that I want to set that tone. Secondly, more specifically, we should, as we develop the budget, have an equity lens to how we spend our money internally. I'll go on and jump immediately into the private sector stuff because we should also have that same lens for how we contract. Fair contracting rules are an opportunity to advance this agenda. I've proposed recently that, for example, we have union janitors cleaning this building, but not necessarily cleaning the buildings that we have leased space in. Well, wait a minute. Why don't we walk our talk and make sure that we have family supporting jobs with benefits by those that we contract with? The city does an awful lot of business in the private sector. So that fair contracting approach, which we've used in some cases partially already, is a great tool to advance this agenda as well.
Thank you. All right, we're now going to hear from Commissioner Jules Harris, representing the folks on the Living and Wellness Committee, a committee that's devoted to taking a look at large issues related to the needs of our folks. Commissioner Harrison, I believe this time you get to go first, Charlie.
Okay.
Public safety is an important issue for all Portlanders, and certainly one we've seen in the news a lot. How would you diversify public safety personnel to include employees with disabilities, especially in the police and fire departments?
It's another case where you don't have to wonder if I'm willing to take the hits and do the hard thing of making change. Some of you remember when I had the Fire Bureau assigned to me in my first month in office. It had 6 African-American men, 2 Asian-American men, and 3 women in a workforce of 800 people. And that was unacceptable to me. And I brought in the one and only fire chief from outside of the Portland Fire Bureau, Bob Wall, and because he had done this in another fire bureau. And we changed the bureau, I hope forever. Now there are 150 women and people of color in that bureau through the trainee program that we created. So I am willing to make cultural change in a public safety bureau. And those are perilous words because it tends to cause unions to support other candidates. And it tends to cause a great deal of resistance when you're doing the right thing. But I think that's what the community wants in this case, is a police bureau that's inclusive. I do want to commend the work that's now being done in recruitment. The Bureau is doing better in terms of recruitment, but I want us to turn from recruiting people of color and diversity from outside of Portland to recruiting here. And again, likewise, look at the opportunities for positions in both of those bureaus that are obviously not line positions, but support positions that could easily be filled by people with disabilities.
And then the follow-up question, how would you improve the responsiveness of public safety personnel to the varied needs of people with disabilities?
I think there are a whole series of issues that need to be addressed in the message of how we operate as a public safety bureau, in either case, and who we recruit, how we train them, and what the rules are for how we operate day to day. Let me just tell you a story, 2 stories very quickly. I did a ride-along with a young officer who really believes in community policing, and he had his windows down calling out to young people in Unthanked Park, telling them it's almost 8 o'clock. He wanted to see them home when he came back the next time. Last Friday night, I was out in Holiday Park with Connected, and a police cruiser drove diagonally across the park on the sidewalk, scattering families and pedestrians, and hopefully the people with visual disabilities were able to get out of the way because they didn't have the siren on. That's the opposite of that. So one thing you do is you set a tone for what you expect, and the other thing you do is you come down hard on aberrant behavior. And I would, if I were police commissioner and I saw that, make a phone call.
Representative Smith.
Agree with Charlie's first point. In fact, I've already reached agreement in principle with the head of the Police Association around a shared commitment to diversifying the Police Bureau, including a follow-up conversation on that topic this morning. That's something we'll do. Another specific thing we can do, and I'll try to combine both your question and your follow-up question, around responsiveness. Some of this is making sure that people have access, and more easy access and more clear access to the service to which they are looking. Luckily, some number of people in our city know that 211 is a number you can dial. Luckily, most of the people, nearly everybody in our city, knows that 911 is a number that you can dial. We right now, I think, have 130 different emergency and access numbers in the city. Most people don't know all 130. There is a 7-digit number that you can call that very few people know, some, that will tell you which of those 130 is the best. I think we should do what Denver and New York and other cities have done and have a single 3-digit telephone number for all non-emergency government phone calls. Whether you have a question about composting or about accessibility or whether you have a possum in your house. And I think that would be a thing we ought to do. If I'm mayor, it will be a priority. We won't get it done in the first year, but we'll get it done in the first term. Next, we should, in terms of setting the tone with the Police Bureau, agree that includes accountability. It also means using the opportunity for a new training facility for new training practices. Let me give one other example that's shared, or one other specific thing that we should do. We have a mental health crisis unit, a mental health mobile crisis unit. However, it's not particularly a crisis unit, and it's not particularly mobile. It's one unit in one precinct, and it's not allowed to be a first responder in a crisis. If instead of just having a generalized expectation that law enforcement personnel participate in some hopefully meaningful but at least cursory mental health training, making sure that officers who opt in engage in a little deeper training, and that when there is a crisis that includes a mental health challenge, that those officers and that unit is called, either as the first or as the second responder. So there are a couple things I think we can do to improve access, a couple things I think we can do to improve responsiveness. I think there's something we can do to improve personnel.
All right. Now we're going to hear from Commissioner Lavon Heister, who is asking the question on behalf of the folks from our Public Outreach and Awareness Committee, and that committee is devoted to trying to raise public awareness about people with disabilities and to do better outreach to become more inclusive, so that we're not just a table of primarily dominant culture people with disabilities sitting here today.
While it is great that the City of Portland has been paving the way in sustainability and bicycle issues, the fact still remains that the issues that involve people with disabilities needs are oftentimes unmet. And so what would, you have already spoken about, this is why I'm kind of faltering on this question, is because you guys have already spoken a little bit about putting people in leadership positions and everything. How would you do that? How do you see that happening? So that people who are part of the people with disabilities are not experiencing the lack of civic rights that are often experienced by people with disabilities.
Okay, so that goes to you first, Jefferson.
And help me clarify the question. Are we talking about hiring? Are we talking about board and commission positions? Are we talking about the conversation?
We are talking about public outreach and awareness. So under the awareness category, we're talking about how do you bring people in at the decision-making levels and the advisory levels with disabilities on more than just the Portland Commission on Disability.
So I think we have at least 3 tools that I mentioned that I'll repeat only very briefly: Office of Equity, a transition team, and our own HR. Let me add a few more thoughts. In terms of the conversation around the city, and this is a place where my commitment can be judged based on the last 10 years of my life, of trying to improve access to democracy. And I have not done this perfectly, but I worked pretty hard to make it more possible for more people to have a seat at the decision-making table. That is a commitment that I will carry with me in hopefully everything I do in my life. And certainly if I'm fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to be elected mayor. There are a couple things. One, the ways we can manifest that. One, and forgive me speaking for Charlie, but I think that he and I both agree on, which is moving city council meetings around the city so that somebody like Michael Egan can make it without necessarily going down, deciding whether he wants to pick Gleason or Halsey as the place he's going to be taking his chair down. Another, thinking about ways for people to feed into decision-making, whether or not they can show up in person, whether or not, and that works not only for a person who has a disability, but also for a person who has 2 jobs, who might not be able to go to a daytime meeting in city council, or maybe even an evening meeting in a place other than city council. So how can we do things like participatory budgeting, like the Chicago's 49th Ward did, where they said, hey, we're not just going to ask you to be an advisory committee. We're going to ask you to be a decision-making body. East Portland Action Plan doesn't say, hey, please just tell the city of Portland how to spend some money. Here's a little bit. You're going to spend it. Right? Taking George W. Bush's line of it's the people's money, instead of saying, therefore, we're going to cut taxes for upper income Americans, what we're going to do, yeah, it's your money, you're going to spend a little bit of it. Also, what the state of Michigan did was they created essentially a super citizen jury. I think it was 312 people to say we're not just going to have the people who can show up or who do show up weigh in. We're going to have a cross-section of the community weigh in on key initiatives. And their pick, I think it was 312, was because that, working with the university, that's what they figured out. They could have every demographic represented accurately. And what they got was a proposal for a major investment in wind energy. So I think thinking about 21st century innovations to decision making, we can include many more people and make better decisions and hopefully make them faster.
Okay. So follow-up question is, I'm going to tag on from the end of the last question because I think it was too long, and focus on the concept of civil rights, which are violations which are often experienced by people with disabilities.
Actually,
So-
can I, Levine, since Mike Levine asked that question, can we come back to that at the end? And I think that your follow-up question's a really good one.
Okay, great. Then before and after the election, what will you do to learn more about equity issues and leading practices, including people with disabilities?
What we've done now and up to now is reach out to people, and not only in preparation for this forum. And we have a growing list of supporters and advisors of the campaign. I mentioned a couple of them that have been trying to get me less stupid on more topics. And that's been helpful. And hopefully, and I think I can say that that is not an electoral commitment, that is a leadership commitment. That why I'm running, not just what I'm saying when I'm running, but why I'm running, is to make the city work better for more people. And although I do some things not very well, one thing I do pretty well is hear from a broad variety of people and with a range of perspectives and try to build cultures where the best idea wins, not only where the most powerful people win. And that, I think, will be a culture that we will work to bring into the mayor's office.
Okay. Want me to start with the first one?
Yeah.
About outreach. Yes, I did propose sometime last year that we start moving city council meetings around the city, perhaps once a month. Do it in community centers or in schools or senior centers, because not everyone can make it downtown easily, and certainly not in the middle of the day. So I think a regular discipline of having some of those meetings at different times and different places is going to be important for civic participation. The closed captioning resolution that was passed last month is one more step that we need to take to make sure that in all our practices, we're taking your policy recommendations and turning them into real stuff in terms of how the city operates. And then third, one of the discussions that I want to have early in the term is, I came from the neighborhood movement originally. I was a neighborhood volunteer and then went to the neighborhood association meeting and then became a board member and then missed a meeting and became president. That's how it works. And I really believe in the neighborhood system in Portland. And it's a very important mediating institution to have commissions like this in neighborhoods, because there are only 5 governing body elected officials and then an auditor. So if we're going to govern a city this big with that few people, we'd better listen to a lot of them and have a structure for that. But it's time to rethink that structure of neighborhood involvement to make sure that we are really inclusive, that we are dealing with all the new ways that all of us communicate, and we communicate in some of the old ways less. So I'm a proud fan of the neighborhood system that we have in Portland, but I think we have to all acknowledge that the 25 people that are willing to show up for a regular monthly meeting in a church basement don't represent the whole community. So how do we improve on that? And there are earnest people at ONI and elsewhere that want to have that conversation, and I want to help lead it. So it's very important that we refresh and rethink even the things like neighborhoods that have worked so well here for the last 30 or more years. Maybe I'll move to your second question. If you come to our campaign headquarters at Grand and Salmon, you'll find an accessible space that will have streetcar service, I think, in about 2 weeks, and has good bus service already, and Bob Pung and some other great volunteers roll in and roll out of our space in order to participate in phone banks and other work. So we're already in the campaign reflecting the kind of Portland that we are and that I want to lead. So you'll see, as I said, not only in my office but in my bureaus and already in my campaign, the kind of inclusiveness that you're fighting for.
So our final question that was prepared in advance is going to be posed by Chair Emeritus of the Commission, Jan Campbell. And Jan, take it away.
Thank you. As mayor, there will be tough choices due to budgetary concerns. How will you balance the needs of all Portlanders, including those with disabilities?
I think you're going first this time.
You are, Mr. Yep.
Okay, sorry. Well, as I said earlier, when we do the budget, there's several disciplines that I want to impose. One is that we will have an equity lens for how we budget, and some good work has already been done along those lines, and I want to support what's been done but do more. Secondly, I want to revive a practice that I've seen used well in this city before, which mitigates against the turf problem of the commission form of government, and that is to make sure that the whole council is engaged on the whole budget. And so I'll assign all the bureaus to myself for the first 3 months while we do the budget. Not because I want to run them all myself, that would eventually kill me, but because that allows us to not have that turf consciousness as we do the budget. And think about the community's priorities first and the bureau's needs subordinate to that. And I think that approach to the budget, done every couple of years, I also hope that we can move to 2-year budgets, because many people in this room spend way too much time, in the cycle working on the budget, and yet we don't change it that much from year to year. So I think those practices, again, of really being serious about an equity lens in the budget process and having the whole council engage on the whole budget will enable us to do that. Then, secondly, there are places where we need more resources. We have to manage the money we have now well, but there are places where we need more resources. Jeff mentioned transportation. I agree. That's an area where even after we do a great job of prioritizing the transportation budget that we have, honestly, the gas tax is not going to cut it for the long run, and we're going to need more resources. And I'm very interested in when the current parks bond measure completes its payments in 2 years, that we go out with another one and be able to tell the taxpayers of the city of Portland, for no additional taxes, we can make more parks improvements. So there are places where I want to look for new revenue, even understanding that taxes are tough and so is the economy.
Yes.
There are 4 ways I know to address a budget challenge. Stop doing some things, find cheaper ways to do some things, raise some revenue, or grow the economy. I'm a yes. So we've got to think about places to save real money. It's one of the reasons I've tried throughout the campaign to be disciplined about tax breaks and about major projects, because while we go say yes to those things, it impacts the whole budget. That's a discipline, whether we're talking about prioritizing and sending our lobby delegation to lobby for a set of highway interchanges or a sustainability center, that we're actually thinking about priorities when we budget. We should be looking at, and this is the challenge I want to put to you, because the temptation I have in coming into the room is saying, oh, here's my laundry list of promises of how I'm going to spend money I don't have, is that where I am wanting, one place I'm wanting help from this commission is, yes, making sure that I'm seeing the whole picture and being more sensitive than otherwise I would be. Also, to ask you to help us think about cost-effective solutions to challenges. Right? Where places, one that was given to me during the course of the campaign was, all right, so we can't afford a sidewalk here. Well, maybe we could afford a little bit of a sidewalk for a piece of it, but we couldn't afford a curb cut. Well, what if we just had a wider shoulder? That's just as easy for someone who can't get up and down on the sidewalk, and much, much cheaper. Are there other ways that we can work with people in this room and actually ask for leadership from people in this room for how, in a 21st century cost-constrained environment, solve problems? And that's maybe the most important request that I have from this group. The other is looking at ways to raise revenue. For the first 60 years of the last century, government raised taxes. That got harder, and now the Tea Party's around. For the last 40 or 50 years, government's been doing tax breaks, and now we're spending more on that in the state than we are in education, public safety, and healthcare combined. And urban renewal debt load is what, a quarter of our property tax revenue? We've got to be thinking about, yes, muddling through with taxes and tax breaks, but also thinking about new revenue streams to help fund public services. And that might include asking TriMet to do some new things, and I want to ask you to be thinking about revenue streams as well. And then, yes, thinking about ways that we can grow the economy. So yes, prioritization, but also realizing that we face budget challenges, and whoever wins this race isn't going to have a magic wand for that.
Okay. Are you going to ask your follow-up question?
So, yes, so I have how would you, as a mayor, improve transportation, specifically for persons with disabilities?
And actually, I think this time, Jefferson, you get to go first.
So I'll start generally, and then I'll move specific. So the general argument I'm wanting to make is, and I often use the term age-friendly transportation system, that a transportation system that works for the whole picture. But I think that our town has had only time-limited political success, and that means over time budgetary success, in championing smaller picture-looking transportation projects. If we make the case and win the case across the city, whether you live in Southwest or East Portland, that we need a transportation system that works for everybody, I think that means a couple of things. Hopefully we build support for it over time, but I think it means some things. One, as we're having debates about where we can and can't afford more light rail or streetcar, we should be asking Ethan Seltzer and other folks about, all right, what's a way to have bus service that isn't only more frequent, but that actually resolves some of people's critiques of bus service for why they don't use it. We have pretty good bus service in our city, but it's been getting a little worse, and partly because of payroll taxes, and partly, I think, because of priority. We build rail projects without having sufficient projections for operating costs. How do we figure out how to do that a little bit better? Also, one thing I've noticed is just basic stuff, whether it's wider shoulders or whether it's sidewalks, whether it's curb cuts, and I mentioned already in my opening, because this is related to why I got into the race, is so that there are places for people to hide from the rain to wait for a bus and places to sit that we can demonstrate that they're useful for everybody, particularly for people who have disabilities.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, I think on the substance of it, I think we're in agreement. There's a lot to do in building out that missing network of streets and sidewalks, 60 miles of unpaved streets in the city and a similar mileage of missing sidewalks. That's a huge responsibility that we need to systematically be working on over the next 20 years. Let's be honest about this. No one sitting here is going to get this finished in 1 or 2 terms in office, but we can get it started. Then secondly, the TriMet system is in crisis. It has done good things, but it's in a fiscal crisis that we have to, and that I as mayor will try to help them out of. That will require legislation. That will require help from the private sector in terms of the payroll tax. That will take growing the economy to build more payroll tax coming into their coffers. It will take careful negotiations with the union there, ATU, in order to get to an outcome that's fair to the workers but doesn't send the agency into a spiral in which they're paying so much for health care and so little for transportation. So there are tough issues there to address, but again, I think we have a capacity here to solve those problems. The little details, of curb cuts and corners matter a lot, and I understand that. Again, the trouble is with me with transportation is I tend to dive right down into the details, but I do understand the big picture, that we've got to be a city where every part of the city is accessible to everyone. That's the goal, and that's why those 60 miles of streets and missing sidewalks really matter.
So gentlemen, there were some folks who came and actually took the time to put some questions on some cards for us to reach you, and we've selected a couple of these that we're going to, I think, have time to ask you today, and then we're making a commitment that we'll send you the questions we don't have time for in writing and ask you to feel free to submit a response, and then folks who want to go to the Commission's page at the Portland City to get the answers. The first one is from a youth, and I think it's important that we hear the voices of youth as well. Sophie Godin has asked, as mayor, What will your relationship with Portland Public Schools, and particularly those focusing on students with disabilities, be? How will you address the issues within the schools such as life skills, classes, bullying, etc.? And I think you're up first this time, Jefferson, or were you last time? Okay, then you're first this time.
Well, the condition of our schools in this city is a motivating issue for why I'm leaving private life and putting myself forward as a candidate. And that was the case when I filed for the office, but after going door to door for a year and talking to thousands of parents who are worried about the social contract in this community, are we going to have a school system that is there for every kid, that is the anchor of every neighborhood, that supports the economy that we're going to have, or not? And, you know, we're a national exception in this way, too. I mean, most other big American cities don't have the kind of support for the public schools that we have here in Portland. People have stuck with it, but they're worried. So I will be a partner for public education at every turn. And I've said that I think we should have a two-tiered legislative priority list for the next session. On tier 2 are all the other issues: economic development, workers' compensation, land use, all the things that the city goes to the session every time for. There ought to be one tier 1 issue, and that's adequate and stable school funding. It doesn't matter that it's not our department. It's the most important issue in this community. And the legislature's commitment to school funding has faded. We've gone from 45% of the state budget down to 39%. We need to find the revenues and keep the commitment for as long as we have the wacky school finance system that we have in this state, and until such time until we all turn to something better. So that, to me, is a commitment that's very important for how I'll spend my time and my energy and my passion and my political capital. And I hope the rest of the council will agree with me that there's nothing more important than having a school system in all of the districts that serve the city, not just Portland Public. David Douglas, Park Rose, Centennial, the other districts in the city deserve our care and attention as well. This is a critical issue for us as a community. So we serve kids with disabilities by being able to have not just the basics funded in each school, but all the programs for special needs kids, as well as music and art and the other things that those parents are wondering if they'll be there for their kids or not.
Okay, Representative Smith, you get the last word on this one.
Partner and priority. We do need to be a good partner, and I've started some of that already. Proud to have the endorsement of my friend Ben Cannon, who now serves as the governor's chief education advisor, and we've talked about how we might better coordinate city and state and regional education. Proud to have the endorsement of Sarah Gelser, who is our previous House Education co-chair, and we've talked about what are policy changes that could happen, what are changes to current tax break scenarios in the state, what are other bigger plays we might make around tax reform. Proud to have the endorsement and support of the teachers in Portland. We've talked about that same statewide as well as citywide challenge, and using these partnerships and relationships and others, hopefully we will be able to wield greater influence statewide than we have over the last 8 years. I will freely concede I have not served in the city council. I will not concede that my experience is less apt for this gig in this century right now. One strength that I do have is that I know pretty well where the bathrooms are in the legislature, and while that's pretty easy to know, I also have some set of relationships with both Democrats and Republicans that I don't want to overstate, but I do think can be helpful. I do think that I can be added value as we think about statewide electoral strategies, we think about statewide and legislative lobbying strategy, and also with our federal partners. Beyond that, also priority. Yes, in a generalized way, but let me pitch one other thing that I need to say in nearly every room I go to if we're going to make it real. And that is that one of the things we know, we do know that this is an important question for this room, because we know that what? 29% of students that are identified as students with disabilities graduate in 4 years, and what, 31% after 5 years? Even though I think it's only 14% of those students have disabilities that are intellectual disabilities, we can do way better. One of the biggest drivers in the achievement gap, not only between students with disabilities or students who are white students and students of color, or upper income students, lower income students, also students in the United States, between students overseas, is the summer gap. What happens and doesn't happen for kids who don't have meaningful opportunities to reduce the summer slide. That's something the mayor can't do by himself or by ourselves, but it's something that we can work together on. That we can set an objective working with nonprofits and libraries and our school districts and private employers to try to improve work readiness and try to improve summer activities, youth employment. This will be one of my top 3 priorities if I'm elected mayor.
All right. Glad you knew some of those statistics. That's always heartening. All right. I think this question is an important question. They're all important questions, of course, but this is the last question we're going to ask you before we ask you to give a final comment here. And this seems like a nice one to go out on, because there's a huge need for this. As mayor, how will you approve enforcement of civil rights and the ADA in a meaningful way in this city? And I believe you get to go first, Jefferson, with that one.
First is a cultural understanding that the Americans with Disability Act is intended to be a floor, not a ceiling. And if we can help educate within the institutions of the city and within the institutions of the city, that is our expectation and that's the reality. I think that can do a little bit to help. Beyond that, I'd mostly refer to some of the things we've talked about, to each of the areas where we can apply that principle, from employment, making sure that people understand that they are subject to federal penalty and civil penalty if they don't comply, but that it shouldn't merely be that stick, but also the potential carrot of having a workforce that it better reflects the community and taps into talent that too many people are missing out on. In transportation, I won't cover all of that ground. I think we've covered it pretty well, but making sure that we do. In schools, yes, in terms of buildings, also in terms of learning behavior. But I think as we add up each of the specific elements that sort of comprise the scope of our conversation today, that the thought that I hope to leave that video camera and the people in this room is that the best way, it is said, to get a person to build a ship is to give them a love for the sea. And if we can give as leaders the understanding that we want this city to work for the whole city, that the whole city will work if and only if the whole city works, and that a regulatory and legal tool like the ADA is merely a manifestation of that value, and it is a manifestation that is intended to be a floor, not a ceiling of that value, then I think hopefully as we move along the details, those details will work better.
Okay. Charlie.
I think 3 things. Work with you in all cases, but on these 3 things. Be a model employer, as you've suggested. Be an aggressive partner, and then be an effective enforcer. The last one's simplest. Enforce the code, enforce the requirements of the ADA on ourselves and on private projects that we regulate through the building code process. We need to do that well, consistently, and make sure that when we don't perform well, that we quickly correct. So that's the easy one. The model employer one is the longer game. It requires the kind of collaboration that I mentioned. The aggressive partner one is probably the most complex, and that is the city of Portland is itself not an island. It doesn't deal just with the state legislature. It deals with 9 or 8 other local governments: the Port of Portland, Metro, TriMet, the County of Multnomah, the city of Education Service District, school districts within the city, Portland Development Commission, and the Portland Community College District. There are a lot of other local governments. We need to be an aggressive partner with all of them in everything we do, including making the built environment and the policy environment coherent and effective for everyone. And the relationships that I have with those other local governments, including with Chair Kogan and the county board and with all those others, alphabet soup that I rattled off there halfway, that's important. And I have those relationships, and I think it's important that we be an aggressive partner, both in, again, the vision of what kind of city we want to be, and the specifics of, oh, you're designing a bridge? Let's make sure that it really works for people, everyone. So I think that kind of combination of do our job of enforcement, set the vision in terms of being a model city, but then also be an aggressive partner in working with all those other local agencies.
Okay, gentlemen, so there are a lot of folks in this audience who represent a lot of constituency groups from all kinds of disabilities. There are so many kinds of disabilities, and there are people who are not even actually associated particularly with disabilities. Getting people with disabilities to be heard and into places like this is a challenge. So I would like to ask each of you as a kind of a final closing comment to think about this. I am representing people with disabilities who are not able to be here. Why should I vote for you? Why are you the person who deserves my vote? And I believe you get to go first.
And you've given us a couple of minutes for this?
Yes. I'm going to give you 3 minutes like you've had on
okay.
this one. You get 3 minutes to convince me, who is representing all the people who are not here, why I should have your vote.
Is this our last question, or is
This is it. This is the last question. This
Okay.
is kind of your summary. This is when you get to sell us.
That's the slow pitch.
That's the slow pitch. Or you can speed it
Well,
up if you like.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your interest and for your passion on this issue and for this good dialogue where we did get into a lot of specifics. And that's the good thing about this phase of the political process is you demand and hopefully we provide specifics about what we'll do and how we'll do each of those things. So thank you for a good dialogue. Many more, I hope, to come. I said earlier that I bring 3 things to this job, and I think those are important things and that they're critical for Portland to be able to continue the progress that we've made. I am a leader. I have brought people together and made things happen here. That's a talent I have, and I want to exercise it for the full common good of this community. Secondly, I do have experience in local government. This is an important job, the most critical and sophisticated local government job in the state, and I'm ready for it on day one. And then third, this is the only office I'm going to ever run for. I'm not on my way to somewhere else, and I think that's important both in terms of how I'll focus on the job and on the risks that I'll be prepared to take, put my political hide at risk for the good of the community rather than the other way around. So those are the credentials I bring, and I think you'll see today and otherwise that each of us will put ideas and issues on the table, and I hope you agree with me on the issues of the moment. Let me spend maybe the minute or 2 I have to talk about other things that we haven't covered, and that's really what I'm passionate about and what I've learned in the last 10 years. You know, many of you know me from when I was a city commissioner, but the last 10 years, as I said, I've been working all over the country. And I've seen a lot of other cities, and I've helped some of them get better, but it also has given me a chance to reflect a bit on Portland from a distance, literally from a distance, or in the seat 23B of Southwest Airlines on the way home. And Portland is a special place. My lawn signs say, "Love Portland," for a reason. We are the best place, and all those miles I've spent walking the neighborhoods campaigning for this office have reiterated that for me. We are a city that not only is a model to the nation, but it's the best place to live, not just because of the physical beauty and livability of our city and the good things we've done to make it physically better, but because of the spirit of community and the spirit of positive action that we have in this community. Planting trees, building light rail, making neighborhood business districts better. And other cities, I'm sorry, they don't have that. And so I've fallen in love even more with Portland. That's it, huh? 30 seconds, sorry. The second thing that I've learned is, on a personal level, I watched my mom struggle with Parkinson's for the last 12 years. Go from using a cane to using a walker to helping fold the wheelchair and get it into the car so that we could go out to lunch. And I've experienced those issues of disability as a member of a family that frankly hadn't had to deal with those issues before. And I learned a lot, just as a son and as a member of a family, about what people with disabilities deal with every day. Obviously, I don't know the half of it, but I learned that much, and it will inspire me, along with my passion for this place, to do the best job as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So I think that when it's offered that one of the qualifications for running for office is that we're not going to look for another job, I think that is a hint that that's a distinction in the race. It's be very clear. If elected, I will finish out my term. I have done that in every elected office that I have run for, which is only one but twice, including the current term, where I served out, even though it meant I had to take 34 days off the campaign, and my own campaign manager told me that that decision probably would mean I wouldn't make it out of the primary. My commitment to this city, I think, is not easy to question, or at least I can say from my perspective is quite deep. Let me say about what we can do. I think we can nudge this city and bring this city along into this century. Think about not only carrying along wonderful things that have been done in our past, but answering questions in a cost-constrained, technologically slightly more advanced world, thinking about new ways to solve problems, different ways to address potholes and storm drains. My commitment will remain getting the city working better for more people. Let me say a little bit about why I'm running. I'm running because I saw that the challenge that our city is facing is that as we've had a cultural commitment to sustainability, as we've occasionally had a cultural commitment to figuring out how our economy is going to work, we haven't had nearly a strong enough cultural commitment to equity, to figuring out how a town that has been pretty much a white town for most of its life, but now isn't moving in that direction. What is it, 49% of our public school students are students of color? Diversity is, we might even need a new word because it will merely reflect who we are as a nation and who we are as a town. I'd be the first mayor in the history of the city elected east of 82nd Avenue. In my school district, 73 languages are spoken. We've got to see the whole picture. But let me also say something about me. I was born here. I went to Grant High School. I grew up in Irvington. I now live, as I said, in East Portland, where my wife is from. My wife works at OHSU, where she works with children suffering from heart defects and who also have developmental disabilities. About myself, I have been candid about in this race that I have been diagnosed with ADHD. It's one of the reasons I bump into things. It's one of the reasons I occasionally do dumb stuff. It's one of the reasons I have to work harder about some stuff. I knew that by doing that, it would open me up for people saying things like, oh, he lacks the temperament to govern. It also has offered me a little bit of sensitivity to understanding that not everyone has a choice about whether or not they will be candid about their own realities. And hopefully, if we're going to figure out how we get the city to work for the whole city, we'll remember that. I am not saying my own challenges are a qualification to govern, but I am saying that I have had a chance through my own life and through my own family and through my own bride that we've got to have a deep commitment, policy making, yes, but also in our souls, of making this city work for everybody. And I appreciate you all having the time today and giving us some of it.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Commission on Disabilities and on behalf of all of the thousands of people in the city and the area that we serve, I would like to thank you for coming and being here with us and being so honest. And I would like to thank you. And I would especially like to thank all of you. I think you deserve the round of applause because you managed to get here during the day to show the candidates that you care. And I think it's very, very important that we let them know that we do care and that we all go out and share what we heard today and let folks know what we heard today and show up at the rest of these forums. We were glad to be your first forum, get some practice out of the gate for you. And believe me, the Portland Commission on Disabilities will be not only watching you both, but working with you, we hope, as we all move forward.
Nyla, perhaps before we depart, we can just find out how the video might be available for people who weren't here today.
Excellent. I don't know the answer to that question. How might this video be available for people who were not here today to watch? Will we be posting it online, on cable? Do we have an answer? So here's my commitment to you then.
We can post online.
We can post it online. So when we say online, then for folks who would be searching for it, are we talking about through the city's website or is there another? Yes. Okay. So look to the Portland Commission on Disabilities website. Next week we'll have some more information about that for you. Perhaps a link to where it will be in some more specific information. And those of you who have Facebook accounts, the Portland Commission on Disability has a Facebook account. You should check us out. You should friend us. And we'll certainly put a link on there as well. And again, please consider joining us because we're trying to And yes, it will be closed captioned because we just put a resolution before the city, which was endorsed, that all materials will, from here on out, be closed captioned. So thank you very much.